Welcome to Module 3 of the MELI Unit's Data Analysis and Reporting course. In this module, we will introduce you to key concepts of qualitative data analysis, including the benefits and challenges to analyzing qualitative data, different qualitative coding methods, and best practices for qualitative coding. Let's get started. What is qualitative data coding? Coding is the process of systematically categorizing the qualitative data to identify themes and patterns for further analysis. When we talk about coding, we are usually working with specific types of data, including interview or focus group transcripts, observation notes, and open-ended survey responses. So why do we work with qualitative data? There are a couple of key benefits to diving into your qualitative data. It can provide deeper insights into experiences and contexts, and it allows you to explore key themes, including ideas you may not have expected to find. That said, qualitative coding does come with some challenges. It is a time-intensive process, and while you can get nuanced details from qualitative data, that is balanced by having a more limited perspective, as you can't generalize across your program with only qualitative data. There are two different approaches to coding. The first is deductive coding. This is when you start with a predefined set of codes, then assign those codes to the new qualitative data. These codes might come from previous research, or you might already know what themes you're interested in analyzing. It might be helpful to think of deductive coding as top-down coding. Deductive coding is best used when you already have an idea of what to expect from your data, perhaps from your theory of change or logic model. There is also inductive coding. This process involves reading and interpreting raw contextual data to develop themes, concepts, or a process model via interpretations based on your data. It is when you allow data to determine your themes, and can be thought of as bottom-up coding. Inductive coding is best when you want to develop new ideas from your data, but it can also be much more time-intensive than deductive coding. These two types of coding are not either or. You can do both. You can set some codes up at the beginning, deductive, and you can also code once you get into your data, inductive. Let's take an illustrative look at what these two processes look like, starting with deductive coding. With deductive coding, you start by developing your codes, and from there, you search your data to find examples of those codes. Now, inductive coding. With inductive coding, we start by reading through our data, then we group what we are seeing into themes, which then become our codes. At this point, you might be asking yourself, how do I develop these codes? Writing codes for qualitative data is a process that takes a lot of trial and error to learn, but we do have a few tips for you as you get started. First is to make sure your codes cover as many qualitative responses from your data as possible. Your code should be generic enough to apply to multiple comments, but specific enough to be useful in your analysis. For example, let's take a look at this comment. The program included a lot of cultural events, which was really cool, but we were in Montana and didn't get to spend any time at national parks, which I would have really liked to do while in the United States. In considering how to code this response, we could use something like program, but that's probably too vague. It doesn't really give us any information about what the response is really saying. On the other hand, a code like program to not allow enough time for visiting national parks is certainly an accurate descriptor of what the response is saying, but it is very specific and probably won't apply to many other responses. Something like program feedback might be the happy medium we're looking for, Or, depending on our other codes, we can even be more specific with something like program feedback, cultural activities. We also want to avoid commonalities between our codes. Having similar codes is okay as long as they serve different purposes. For example, skills development and networking are different enough from one another that we can include both. However, something like skills development and skills may have subtle differences for you, but should probably be combined into a single code as they are highly similar to one another. We also want to ensure that we are capturing both the positive and the negative. You want to try to create codes that contrast with each other to track both the positive and negative elements of a topic separately. Using the example of our program feedback code, positive program feedback and negative program feedback would allow us to capture both sides of that feedback. And lastly, in order to make your analysis as useful as possible, try to find a balance between having too many and too few codes. This very much means you are looking for the Goldilocks situation with your codes. You want to avoid a situation where there are as many codes as there are responses. In other words, each code you write only applies to one individual response. You also want to avoid getting to a point where every single code applies to every single response. In both of these cases, your coding exercise will not be fruitful, as you will not have learned anything new about your data. You want to be right in the middle, where some codes apply to some responses and all responses are still covered. Regardless of whether you go with deductive or inductive coding, here are some tips for setting up your coding process. Start by organizing your clean data into a table. Then identify your themes. Read through each and every response, tagging them with relevant codes along the way, and then repeat as necessary. Remember that coding is an iterative process. If you're wondering about tools for qualitative coding, some free options include Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, or even just good old pen and paper. And if you're looking to make an investment in a tool, you might want to consider NVivo, Deduce, Atlas TI, or even Qualtrics, especially if you are working with open-ended survey data. Let's wrap up this module with some tips for summarizing your findings. It is not necessary to count or to quantify qualitative responses. You'll want to present common themes and ideas that appear together. Focus on the theme of the response, not the specific wording. Make sure you are highlighting unexpected themes. And finally, validate or double check your findings with a partner. So that's it for our module on qualitative data analysis. When you're ready, you can head back to the training overview and move on to Module 4 on data visualization and reporting.